If you feel like your mental health has been impacted by this pandemic, then believe me, you're not alone. COVID-19 has had a significant impact on our mental health in a variety of different ways. So it could be that you've suffered a loss, and when we say loss, we don't just mean through a bereavement. That could also mean sort of the loss of connection we've all experienced, or losing a job. A lot of people are also feeling scared or worried or anxious at the minute for a variety of different reasons, be that sort of health anxiety or being scared to leave the house. And also anger is another common emotion for a variety of different reasons. And that's just a few feelings, but whatever you're feeling is valid. So there was a very brief overview of how COVID has impacted people's mental health. And like I said, there are many other responses that people have had, and all of those feelings are valid. So please do remember that. But I think the most common response and the most common feeling that I think we've had as a community is a feeling of anxiety, and an anxiety that's come about due to all the changes that have happened this year, and changes, that have been out of our control. So that's where I want to focus this video for World Mental Health Day, focusing on what anxiety is and how we can manage that, particularly in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So without further ado, let's learn a bit more about what anxiety actually is. Anxiety is a feeling of worry, unease, or nervousness. It can include physical symptoms such as a dry mouth, tight chest, increased heart rate, or feeling sick or shaky. And it also includes psychological symptoms like feeling on edge or feeling a loss of control. So there are just a few of the ways that anxiety can have an impact on our bodies and our minds. So I think it's really important to talk about anxiety, especially on a day like today, like World Mental Health Day, because anxiety is such a common experience. We've all felt anxious or nervous from time to time, be that when we start a new job, our first day of school, before we take a test. And sometimes a little bit of anxiety can actually be quite a good thing, because it'll help us to push forward and try and do our best. But it's when that anxiety is long lasting and constant and at a high level, that's when it can become an issue. And that's when some of these, well, I hope some of these tips that I offer in this video can be helpful. So like I said at the beginning, COVID has caused so much change this year, so much has changed, and a lot of uncertainty. And that can bring about a feeling of hopelessness and unease, which in turn can turn into anxious feelings. As well, COVID and especially lockdown, it's given people a lot of time to think. And if you're already quite an anxious person, a lot of time to overthink. So anxiety, it can generate a lot of these what if questions. And a lot of the time these are questions that we can't answer. And when we can't find the answers to these questions, that leaves us feeling even more anxious. So it's a bit like a vicious circle. So we feel anxious, we think about these what if questions, and when we can't answer them, that causes more anxiety, and so the circle continues. And finally, another way that COVID has impacted our anxiety is because all of this is out of our control. We haven't chosen for all this to happen. And feeling out of control can really trigger anxiety feelings in a person as well. Because it's scary when we don't have control over something, when we can't choose things, we can't control what's happening around us or to us. And when we don't feel in control, we feel powerless, and that again can lead to feeling anxious. So now we've spoken a bit about what anxiety is, the impact of COVID on our anxieties, let's now talk about how we can manage them. So like I said, so these next couple of clips, I will be talking you through some activities that you can do at home to learn a bit more about your anxiety, and hopefully in turn that'll help you manage it a bit better. So the first of these activities is called the Curcles of Control. So you'll remember that at the beginning of this video I spoke about how a lot of the time with anxiety it's all those worries about things and do we have control over them or not. So this activity is a great way to distinguish between what we do have control over, what we don't have control over, and hopefully we'll learn to try and let go of things that we can't control.
Circles of Control is a great exercise for anyone suffering from anxiety. All you'll need is a pen and some paper for this one. So on that bit of paper, we're going to draw one small circle right in the middle, and then around that small circle we're drawing a larger circle. The smaller circle we're going to label things within my control, and the larger circle we're labelling things out of my control. So within the small middle circle we're writing things that we have control over, so my own self-care, my own hand hygiene, my thoughts and actions, my own social distancing, how much news I consume, and then things out of our control, so how others behave and think, if other people wear a mask, how long this pandemic will last, decisions made by the government, who gets the virus, predicting what might happen. So essentially the middle circle are things in our control, the things we will focus on, and then the things out of our control are things that we will try to let go of.
So now you might have done your circles of control. We've looked at the things that are within our control. They're the things that we can focus on. But what about how are we going to try and let go of the things out of our control? Because I think that is easier said than done. So one way of trying to let go of those thoughts is to challenge some of those irrational thoughts that you might be having. A lot of the time, anxious thoughts are quite irrational. And when we challenge those thoughts, we can sort of poke holes in those thoughts and realise that they're not real. So there is a whole video on our Facebook page about challenging negative thoughts, but I will talk about it briefly here as well. So what we can do is put our thoughts on trial. So we're going to see if there's any evidence to back up our thoughts. So imagine that we're a top-notch lawyer and we're putting our thoughts on trial and we're finding the evidence for and against these thoughts. So ask yourself questions like, like I say, what evidence is there that this thought is real? Is this thought based on facts or feelings? What would I say to a friend that was thinking this? How likely is it that this fear or this thought is going to come true? And what is actually more likely to happen? So when we start to ask these questions, we're challenging these thoughts and we're realising that actually this is our anxiety thinking and not us. And we can start to let go of some of those worries. This next activity is about recognising the signs of anxiety. So we're looking out for those symptoms that I mentioned earlier. So the physical stuff, the emotional symptoms, and as well some of the behaviours that we can exhibit when we're feeling anxious. So the idea is we're learning what are those early warning signs of anxiety. And when we can recognise those early signs, when our anxiety levels are a bit lower, we can then introduce our coping strategies and hopefully stop those anxiety levels from increasing to full-blown panic mode.
So this activity is all about recognising some of the signs of becoming anxious so that we can intervene before it gets intense. So we're going to draw a table with 3 headings: emotionally, physically and behaviourally. And then under each of these headings we're going to write how anxiety makes us feel. So emotionally might be things like feeling out of control or feeling on edge. Physically could be things like butterflies in the stomach, getting sweaty palms, or having a headache. And then behaviourally could be things like starting to fidget, or becoming shaky, or becoming really annoyed and irritable. What we can then do is attribute these symptoms to an anxiety thermometer, which we label from 0 to 10, 0 being little to no anxiety, 10 being high anxiety levels. And then on this thermometer, we can put our symptoms, how we feel as our anxiety increases. And the idea is that we learn what these warning signs are so that we can intervene when our anxiety levels are low so that they don't get to a 10.
So if you've done your thermometer, that's a great way of recognising what symptoms you show, how you're behaving, how you feel when your anxiety is at different levels. So when the anxiety is, it's starting to creep in, we're sort of from 0 to a 5, that's when we can try and put in some self-care strategies, doing things you like, trying to distract yourself. so that we can prevent that anxiety from increasing and getting to a 10. But things that might work if we're finding that that anxiety has passed that level are things like breathing techniques or progressive muscle relaxation, or some grounding techniques that will bring you back into the here and now. And again, we've got loads of videos on our Facebook page about those things. One of our therapists, Sam, has posted about mindfulness and things for World Mental Health Day. So, you know, do check them out. You might pick up some useful skills that you can use when you're feeling anxious. But it's all about learning what works for you and what helps get you out of that situation. So there we have it. I hope that you guys have found that useful. We've spoken about anxiety, where that comes from, the impact of COVID on our anxieties, and we've talked about how we can learn a bit more about it and hopefully manage it as well. So I'm hoping you found it useful. Please do like and share if you have. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoy all of the other videos that are on offer. But yeah, thanks and take care.